Happy Friday.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
Thanks very much, President. So here we are, and the corks must be popping in the arms industry boardrooms all over Europe. A plan rushed through behind closed doors, no public consultation, no public debate, presented as a fait accompli, just waiting for our rubber stamp. A unilateral declaration by an unelected commissioner that Europe is now a war economy. Not a war on poverty or homelessness or on climate change, but a diktat to the public of Europe that they have to accept another 1 billion euros being laundered from their pockets into the fat wallets of the global arms industry. The workers in those factories have to suck up the suspension of the Working Time Act, and if they don't, they'll be brandished as traitors or Kremlin agents. And if that wasn't bad enough, it won't be just our arms industries, because our friends in the US and Israel can dip into the pot, flog off bits to their European counterparts who'll do the final assembly, put a stamp and a premium on it, and it's champagne all round. And why wouldn't it be? At 3,000 to 4,000 euro per shell, and the workers of Europe are expected to pay for 1 million of them. It's absolutely outrageous. If you really cared about Ukraine, you'd be pushing for peace. But the EU hasn't lifted a finger to push for peace in Ukraine. In fact, it's done everything to escalate the conflict and prevent peace. Because for the EU, it's all about the war profiteers. And the catastrophe in Ukraine is nothing more than a global opportunity for your friends. It's an absolute disgrace. It's about time you started to work for peace.
Next.
Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. If you are new, I want to let you guys know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. And that was just Claire Daly, and she's 100% correct. If you really do care about the people in Ukraine, you will be calling for some type of peace negotiation, not trying to find ways to escalate this war. And that is exactly what is happening right now. And we're going to get into that story tonight. Shout out to all of you watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And welcome, guys, and happy Friday. I am going to give shout outs to people in the chat. We'll shout out patrons, and then we'll jump right in. We have some interesting stories tonight. Shout out to Miguel, says happy Friday. Greetings, Mary, who's a Sabby member, says hi, chat room. What's going on? Steven said that should read Paulin. Shout out to Dr. Nick, says hi, everybody. Greetings, Bryce, says it's Friday night and I feel all right. The party is here on the west side. Sup, Sabby and everybody. That song is from it's Friday night and I feel all right. Party is here on the west side. I forget who it's from. What's going on? V says, shout out to Bryce. Greetings, Silver Surfer, says Sabby, peace, love, live long and prosper. Shout out to Hannah G, says the frauds. Greetings, Mastermind, says happy Friday, fam. What's going on? Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says here on time. Yay. Greetings. Make sure I don't skip you. Greetings, Lorez says, hello, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Hit the like. Yes, that event was so cringe, especially the part where Ayanna gaslighted about student debt cancellation. That's right. We're going to get into that. What's going on? Angela, who's a Sabby member, says greetings and happy Friday to all. Shout out to Gamer, says hello. What's going on? Sean says you're. Shout out to CBC Voter, says yo, yo, yo. Happy Friday, Sabby Sabs. Shout out to Earth Centered. Time to smoke a doobie doobie doo. What's going on? Raul says a doobie doobie doo. Shout out to, you guys love that song. Shout out to Corey, who's a Sabby member, says, happy Friday, Sabby fam. Let's go. Greetings. Eric, who's a Sabby member, says, hi Friday to all lefty peeps. Shout out to Mark, says, Sabby. Mark. What's going on, DC, says, people dying, carting home fuel. Thanks, progressive sniper bullets. Ay, ay, ay. What's going on? Where he says, hey, everybody. Shout out to Bad Garden. Says, I love Claire Daly. She tells it like it is. Yes, she does. Shout out to Left Less. What's up, everyone? Greetings. I'm just making sure I'm not skipping people. Greetings. Cook said he made the list. Oh, my. Yes. Shout out to Mark, says she is awesome. One of the 2 real MPs. I agree. Shout out to John, says doobie doobie doo. What's going on? Myra's mama, says everybody. Shout out to Tia, says, yep, Mr. Dore has been added to the list. His threat level has gone international. I know, right? It's crazy times we're living in. What's going on? Mal says, Sabby Sabs, did you see TYT video about Russia and F-16S? They got roasted in the comments. I have not. I don't watch TYT. I haven't seen TYT in a long time. But I can imagine that they did. Greetings, Nisi says, hey there, Sabby. Hello, Nisi. And shout out to Pachico, who's also a Sabby member, says, happy Friday, Sabby Sabs, and peace. We are getting right into it, man. Right into it. All right. So let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. It really does go a long way, believe it or not. I need to do more on Patreon. I'll get that figured out at some point. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. Don't forget about those Sabbies. And of course, members, which I should probably rename this so people don't confuse this with the YouTube channel members. I can imagine that can cause some confusion. Anywho, all of their names are listed here. They're also scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Thank you guys so much for your help over here in Sabby land. Okay, we have some things to discuss tonight. It is Friday. A little mixture of the stories here, but I think they all kind of have a common theme, so to speak. I think you'll be able to figure it out. But let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail to show you what we are going to discuss tonight. Tonight, we are discussing Jimmy Dore is on the list. Yikes. What list am I referring to? And how did this happen? We're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Russia making moves in Belarus. If you have not heard this news that came out recently, we're going to discuss that tonight. That's why I played that video from Claire Daly. I think it's very important that we continue to stress that there needs to be a call for peace. We're also going to discuss the Cringe Squad event that happened in DC. Colin from Indie News Network was actually at that event, and he got a couple of videos that we're going to share and we're going to discuss. And also something just happened actually right before I went live in reference to Jose and Lucy for another event. And I'm going to share that as well. And last but not least, we are going to discuss those North Dakota ballot measure wins. So we will get into that. And also I am going to give you an update about the Boston RBN chapter, the first event that I want to do, and give you more information about that at the end of the stream. So let's go ahead and get started with the first story here. We're going to start off by discussing what is happening with this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So I feel like every week there is more news about this war. But what I'm about to tell you right now really needs to give you pause. And I don't want to hear it from people who were basically saying this was a waste of time to focus on this, from people who were telling me that this is not important and we shouldn't be focusing on it. Because Richard Medhurst actually tweeted this, and then I dove in a little bit further. He was the one who brought this to my attention, and I think you all need to take a look at this. Breaking news. Russia has just inked a deal to place tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. We are inching closer to nuclear war with Russia, and there will be no going back. But yeah, keep sending weapons and F-16s. Let's just send Ukraine our own while we're at it. Why not? This tweet actually received over 100,000 views, which is good. So that means that more people are paying attention to it. But Russia is making moves, and they have already decided to move nuclear weapons to Belarus. I have a video clip I want to show you, and then I have an article I'm going to get into as well, because we tried to warn people that the last thing we need in reference to this war is any type of escalation. And this is exactly what is happening. So it was really interesting to me, the number of people who told me we should not focus on these anti-war rallies, or that it's not that important, that we should focus more on a presidential candidate. And what people have to understand is that presidential candidates, Medicare for all of these issues that a lot of us are continuing to fight for, none of these things matter if we're all dead because of a nuclear war. Let's get into this clip here from Sky News.
Joining me now, military analyst, retired Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. Sean, great to see you. Talk us through just what happened. We learned about this yesterday, and how significant it is that they're going to be stationing these weapons there in Belarus.
Sounds quite alarming whenever we're talking about nuclear weapons, the rhetoric. In addition to signing the deal and, of course, those extra aircraft, they're also positioning Iskander missiles, which are capable of carrying the warheads. And, of course, Russia's got to find storage facilities in Belarus. They're going to build those. They'll be ready by July. But it's worth remembering that these weapons will still be under Russian control, even though they're forward deployed.
Okay, so we're going to pause here for a second, because I just want to show you the map. So here is Russia. Over here to the right, here is Ukraine. Down here, here's Kyiv, and here is Belarus. You see why this is so concerning? Let's go on.
I'm old enough and ugly enough. The former Soviet Union, when it was around, when it collapsed, a lot of the weapons, the nuclear weapons, were forward deployed. And by 1996, weapons that had been deployed in Belarus, Kazakhstan and Ukraine were all back on Russian soil again. So actually, this move of forward deploying it to Belarus is just reversing that trend. It's also worth noting the Americans say they're monitoring the situation, but they say there's no evidence whatsoever that Russia is planning to use nuclear weapons.
Interesting sort of relaxed response. I'm sure the Poles will be wondering a little bit more nervously about things like that. Talk us through, though, some...
Yeah, he mentioned it was a relaxed response. I don't think this should be a relaxed response. Not at this point in time. Because to me, this is just showing you again, this is escalating this war. This war is not de-escalating, it's escalating. And at one point in time, there was a meeting, this was a couple weeks ago we covered this, there was a meeting with Xi Jinping and with Putin to talk about some type of peace negotiation. I don't know what happened with that. I don't know where that went. But then after that story, remember, it was just maybe a week or two ago that I explained to you that there was an attack on the Kremlin, which essentially would be similar to an attack on the White House. So you have to understand the importance and the significance of that. And now here we are.
The other thought process is what else is happening behind the scenes to lead to this decision by the Russians?
Well, Russia has a huge nuclear arsenal. It's got nearly 6,000 nuclear weapons. They can blow the world up several times over. They can be launched from air, land or sea, from the bombers there, from submarines or from land base. And of course, over the years, it's become less worried about range. They use intercontinental ballistic missiles, so they can be based anywhere. So the fact that they're forward deploying these is actually irrelevant from a military perspective. So this is almost certainly about messaging. It's worth remembering Russia is not doing well in the war in Ukraine. There's a bit of saber rattling. But if we look back to this month's visit by Xi Jinping, he made very, very clear to Putin at the time, this is, it's not about, he should not deploy or use nuclear weapons in this conflict. So I think actually the bigger worry here is almost certainly for Belarus, bizarrely, because Russia's made really clear, Putin certainly, he wants to re-assimilate Belarus back into the former Russian Empire. They've been deploying troops forward. They've been mounting operations out of Belarus. They've now got aircraft out of Belarus, and they're now looking at mounting tactical nuclear weapons there. So it's a real worrying sign, I think, for Belarus.
Did you guys notice that he said that Russia is not doing well in this war, but they don't continue to tell you that also Ukraine is not doing well in this war either? They are continuing to push this narrative to convince people that Ukraine is winning this, and they're not. If they were winning it, let's use common sense here, people. If they were winning, the United States government wouldn't have to continue to send them weapons and aid. And that's continuing. We just talked about the G7 summit where Zelensky was there and he was asking for more aid, and Joe Biden agreed to give him more weapons and more aid. So if they were doing so well, they wouldn't need to continue to ask for help. Let's remember what they said about fighting until the last Ukrainian. That means until everyone's dead. And more people need to push back on that. The way that people just go along with these talking points, the fact that these two commentators are discussing this as calmly as they are, that is very concerning for me.
Also, is there an aspect that Vladimir Putin's making this announcement for his domestic audience?
Almost certainly. I mean, yesterday, this interview, it was on a state-owned TV channel, so it was all carefully managed. Very confident Putin talking about the West will never be able to sustain its level of support. And also, we're going to have 1,600 brand new main battle tanks in Russian hands by the end of the year. But if you look at the facts behind that, US economy is 10 times the size of Russia. The collective UK, France, Germany is 5 times the size of Russian. And therefore, it's easily got the capacity. And
No, this part right here, let's go back to what he just said. Listen to this.
But if you look at the facts behind that, US economy is 10 times the size of Russia. The collective UK, France, Germany is 5 times.
He just mentioned Germany, right? What did I just tell you about Germany last night? Germany just announced yesterday morning they have entered a recession. So I don't even know why he's mentioning Germany. Yes, Germany has the 4th largest economy in the world, but they just announced they're going into a recession. He mentioned the UK. People in the UK can't even afford to pay for heat. You see what is it? Now we're going into the warmer months, but people in the UK have been struggling economically since the start of this war. And the way that they're talking about this, they're making it seem like these countries are doing so well. He also mentions France. Didn't we talk about how many times for the past couple of weeks, all the people protesting in France against Macron's pension reform? The people in France are out in the streets. They're not thinking about helping you fight your war. But the way he just mentions these countries as if they're so stable and strong right now, and they're not.
The size of the Russian, and therefore it's easily got the capacity. And in terms of how they're going to build the tanks, Russia's only factory building tanks can build 20 a month. They're losing 150 a month. It's very difficult to see how they'll do the maths. And even Russian commentators are turning around and saying they're going to have to open the cupboards, bring more out of storage, and even potentially bring the T-34 out of storage. That's the 1940s, that was first brought into service, has no place on the battlefield whatsoever. Shahed 136 drones, 71 used from Iran. Big pauses because Russia's running out. And I think despite the rhetoric that Putin's coming out with, Russian industry is struggling. And Russia is increasingly reliant on its importing weapons from its few friends.
And so is Ukraine. You see the problem with the talking points? He said that Russia is relying for importing weapons from its friends, but Ukraine is relying on weapons to come from its friends too. Russia has a friend called China. Ukraine does not. You have to remember, Russia is a part of BRICS. You don't think, like, if this pops off, you don't think that Putin can't just go to Xi Jinping and say, I need some help. Then what? Then what? They're talking about this like this is no big deal as we're moving closer and closer towards the possibility of a World War III. And that would be an absolute disaster. The way they just spew this, like the narrative. This is why I wanted you to hear this. It's not just American mainstream media that's doing this. Even Sky News, they're all in on it.
Just quickly going back to this timing of this decision to say they're going to station these weapons in Belarus. Any surprise that it came after he'd met with President Xi? Something that President Xi would have said, yes, OK, you can have my tacit approval to do something like that?
I think it's much simpler than that, to be brutally honest. I think we've seen on the battlefield that Putin's going from offense to defense. He would have hoped to have got further, particularly around Bakhmut. And I think now he's really worried about what Ukraine is going to do on their counterattack. And therefore, he's trying to saber rattle to try and scare the Western community, because without Western aid, Ukraine's counteroffensive would be very difficult to mount.
Really interesting. Sean, as always.
You know, they can try to sleep on Putin if they want to. He's saying that he's playing defense and not offense. You don't know what he has planned. You know, you never, tell your right hand what your left hand is doing. Obviously, it's not like he's going to come forward and say, oh, by the way, and I'm planning this, this, and this. No, like, he's not stupid. Sleep on him if you want to. Now, The Guardian also wrote about this. I want to talk about this article a little bit. It says Russia moving nuclear warheads to Belarus, says dictator Lukashenko. Listen to this. The Belarusian ruler, Alexander Lukashenko, has said that Russia has begun moving tactical nuclear warheads for storage to Belarus, adding that it was possible that the weapons had already arrived in his country. We had to prepare storage facilities and the rest over there in Belarus. We've done all of that. This is why the relocation of nuclear munitions began. That's coming from Lukashenko. He was asked if the weapons had already arrived, and he said, maybe. I will go and take a look. Highlight this. Maybe I will go and take a look. He doesn't even know. Like, they are just being so nonchalant about this. It is disturbing. I don't know. Do you know if there's any nuclear weapons in your country that's another country has brought in? I don't know. Let me go check. It's not like you're checking on a roast in the oven to see if it's done. You see what I mean? They're just so casual about this. The remarks came hours after Russian and Belarusian military officials signed a pact that provides for Moscow to deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, marking a shift in the Kremlin's nuclear posture that could raise the stakes of any future instability in Belarus. The plan to deploy tactical nuclear weapons on foreign soil is Russia's first since 1991. The Kremlin has defended the decision, saying that it is being provoked by Western powers supporting Ukraine. In other words, us. They feel they're being provoked by the U.S. government. And yeah, you can add the other countries in as well. You could say UK, France, Germany, yada, yada. But at the meat of it, at the root of it all, is the U.S. government. Those other countries like France and UK and Germany, they are following our lead. Germany didn't decide to send Leopard tanks into Ukraine until they got the lead from the U.S. government, until Biden decided to send tanks to Ukraine. Then Germany decided, okay, well, we'll do the same thing. They're not acting alone. They're following us. And this is one of the reasons why Macron mentioned that maybe some of us European countries should not continue to follow the U.S. government lead. Maybe we should have our own, Western power and not follow them in reference to this conflict, this tension that the U.S. government has between the conflict between China and Taiwan. Now, Macron can't handle his own country right now, and he has his own issues that he needs to deal with in France. But he did have a point about that. When is it okay for an ally, a Western ally, to push back and say, I am not in agreement with you on this particular issue? And if they do that, will they remain an ally? Russia has said it will maintain control over the tactical nuclear weapons, which may be launched on Iskander-M missiles or from Su-25 planes, both of which Belarus has in its arsenal. Belarus borders 3 NATO countries and has missiles that could reach several capitals. The U.S. also has about 100 such weapons stationed at bases around Europe. Notice they stress this, stationed at bases around Europe, because the United States government has over 800 military bases around the world. The transfer would further align Russia and Belarus militaries as Russia seeks a closer alliance with Minsk, which some have predicted will lead to Belarus's loss of sovereignty. The Russian defense minister, Sergei, said the two countries would look for other ways to integrate their militaries. That decision came as Russia is bracing itself for a potential Ukrainian counterattack that could put Moscow on the defensive in its 15-month-old war. The head of the Wagner Group said his Russian paramilitary organization had begun to withdraw from the city of Bakhmut and would hand all its positions over to the regular Russian army by June 1st. And then we can see one of the tanks there. And then I want to go to this piece right here. Ukraine's deputy defense minister said on Thursday that Russia had begun to replace Wagner units with regular troops on the outskirts of Bakhmut, but that Wagner fighters remained inside the city. So again, I just want to remind you, we're only hearing one side of the story here. This is coming from Ukraine's deputy defense minister. We don't know if that's true or not because we haven't heard the other side. There's two sides to a story. And notice they tend to quote and reference what's happening with this war in reference to people that are in Ukraine, on the Ukraine side. So you're hearing their side of the story. A lot of times we're not hearing from journalists, right, and other politicians in Russia to hear their side of the story. So that's important to note. Russia recently claimed to have finally captured the city after nearly 250 days of fighting, a statement Kyiv disputes. Most analysts expect Ukraine to launch a counterattack, potentially threatening the Russian military's hard-fought gains in Bakhmut and other areas of the front. So again, notice how they frame it. See, when they tell you something that Russia said, notice how they're willing to jump in and say that, well, Kyiv disputes that. But when it's the other way around, they don't. They just say, well, Ukraine said this, but they don't come in and tell you that Russia has disputed what Ukraine is saying. A Ukrainian official on Thursday suggested the counteroffensive would not mark a significant shift of gear. This is not a single event that will begin at a specific hour of a specific day with a solemn cutting of the red ribbon. That's coming from Podolak, who is the presidential advisor. Russian militias aligned with Ukraine also launched a cross-border raid earlier this week, setting up chaotic battles in the Belgorod region in some of the first sustained fighting on Russian territory since the beginning of the war. Ukraine has denied any connection to the fighters. See? Anything to make Ukraine look good. So the narrative is important, but this is very concerning. I hope more people cover this. I had warnings about people that this is actually, we're going into an escalation of this war. And I want to play this again for those of you who just joined, what Claire Daly had to say. Now, she's been very vocal about this war and all wars, honestly, about how we need to have some type of call for peace. But even nowadays, even if you say that, people will smear you and call you a Putin puppet because how dare you call for peace? Why would you do that? because that doesn't help the military industrial complex. And there's a lot of money to be made in war. There's a lot of profit to be made here. And we have to remember the goal is not necessarily to win. The goal is to have a never ending war and continuing to funnel money. Julian Assange woke us up to this a while back. But Claire is 100% correct here.
Thanks very much, President. So here we are, and the corks must be popping in the arms industry boardrooms all over Europe. A plan rushed through behind closed doors, no public consultation, no public debate, presented as a fait accompli, just waiting for our rubber stamp. A unilateral declaration by an unelected commissioner that Europe is now a war economy. Not a war on poverty or homelessness or on climate change, but a diktat to the public of Europe that they have to accept another 1 billion euros being laundered from their pockets into the fat wallets of the global arms industry.
Notice she mentions the profit to be made here, right? So that piece is important. More people need to say that. Our politicians should be calling that out. Our politicians in DC should stress the amount of profit that is to be made here and what this is really all about.
The workers in those factories have to suck up the suspension of the Working Time Act, and if they don't, they'll be brandished as traitors or Kremlin agents. And if that wasn't bad enough, it won't be just our arms industries, because our friends in the US and Israel can dip into the pot, flog off bits to their European counterparts who'll do the final assembly, put a stamp and a premium on it, and it's champagne all round. And why wouldn't it be? At 3,000 to 4,000 euro per shell, and the workers of Europe are expected to pay for 1 million of them. It's absolutely outrageous. If you really cared about Ukraine, you'd be pushing for peace. But the EU hasn't lifted a finger to push for peace in Ukraine.
That's because, and the reason why the EU hasn't pushed for peace in Ukraine is because, once again, they follow the lead of the US government. So in order for there to be a push for peace, it would have to come from the White House first. And then the other countries that are our allies would get on board. But she's correct.
Ukraine. In fact, it's done everything to escalate the conflict and prevent peace. Because for the EU, it's all about the war profiteers. And the catastrophe in Ukraine is nothing more than a global opportunity for your friends. It's an absolute disgrace. It's about time you started to work for peace.
She's right. 100%. It is a disgrace. And what is going to happen to Ukraine when this war is over? What happens to the country? Do you think they're going to be okay economically? This country would be destroyed. They have all these investors coming in, BlackRock, willing to work with Zelensky. What is happening here? If people open their eyes and pay attention, they can see what this is really about. This is a hustle. This is a hustle. And any of you that have had a hustle, any type of side hustle, you know one when you see one. You mean to tell me you're fighting for your life? People in Ukraine, that you guys are fighting for your lives. And at the same time, Zelensky is over here making deals with companies like BlackRock to come into Ukraine and set up shop. You got time to do business deals and negotiations. And people are fighting for their life. This is a hustle. And that's what you need to start calling it. It's a mess. This is a mess. But share this with people. Share this. A lot of people don't know about this. Terrible. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Julia. Doobie. Love it, Sabs. Thank you so much, Julia. Cook says they better start negotiating. Russia is serious. Hugo says the propaganda is sickening. And Mark says this is how our last war begins if we do not rein in our government by MIC. It's crazy, man. Most people have no idea what's going on. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our next story. Now, this one is about the squad. So I don't know if you were aware, but they actually held an event in DC. Now, the purpose of this event, the way that it was advertised, is to help them mobilize and organize on a national level, right? to basically help them get more of them in DC and to put, I guess, some type of pressure on the establishment. Now, hold on to what I just told you, because Colin actually attended this event. Colin is a part of Indie News Network, and Colin explained to me that at that event, the audience were basically PMCs, professional managerial class. And the squad, remember, they were supposed to be supporting the working class people. When we look back on the beginning of Justice Democrats, it was supposed to be people, everyday people who were part of the working class, to run for office, to primary challenge these establishment Democrats that are incumbents, and to take those seats and to really push back in DC. That was the whole point of Justice Democrats, so that they can get some of these progressive policies passed. But along the way, what we started to notice is that it seems like the candidates that won through Justice Democrats were not really a part of the working class. A lot of them came from corporate America. They were professional managerial class. And this is no shade to people who are PMCs, but that is not how Justice Democrats was described in the beginning. So then there is this idea that you have people who are supposed to be a part of the working class. AOC was a bartender, and they leave out the fact that she also owned a startup at one point in time. They leave out this crucial things that I think is important for people to know. And because I worked at Boston University, I did a little bit of digging myself, and I said, I find it hard to believe that this woman went to BU and she's just a bartender. And I was correct. She wasn't just a bartender, but it's not just her. Ayanna Pressley was a former city councilor here in Boston. Now, originally with Justice Democrats, these candidates were not supposed to already have political experience. They were supposed to be everyday working class people. But then you had people that had political experience. Even someone like Cori Bush, for example. Yes, it's true. Cori Bush at one point was homeless. Yes, she's been through a lot. But I found it interesting that it was not mentioned that she also had political members in her family. These are the kind of things that people need to know. And when I think back on it, sometimes I feel like Justice Democrats was just a scam from the very get-go. But Colin went to this event, and there's a couple of clips that I want to show you. The first one that I want to dive into is specifically about the student debt cancellation. Now, remember, this is something that Ayanna Pressley, Elizabeth Warren, and Chuck Schumer actually pushed in an effort to get Joe Biden to cancel student debt. Well, Colin was brave and bold enough to ask them, didn't you instruct Joe Biden to do it a certain way? Does Ayanna Pressley answer that question? Let's see.
Congressman, didn't you give a memo to Biden with Senator Warren regarding student debt to tell him to use the Higher Education Act?
Let me just say this, because I'm gonna get in trouble if I start taking questions from the floor, okay? But I want to say on student debt and where that fight stands right now, it is in the Supreme Court. By the way, expand the courts.
This is diversion. So let's go back and listen to the question that Colin asked her.
Congressman, didn't you give a memo to Biden with Senator Warren regarding student debt to tell him to use the Higher Education Act?
Let me just say.
Okay, that's the question. Again, yes or no question. By the way, I know the answer to that, and I have the receipt, and I'll show you in just a second. Watch her pivot to the Supreme Courts and how we need to expand the Supreme Court.
Because I'm gonna get in trouble if I start taking questions from the floor, okay? But I want to say on student debt and where that fight stands right now, it is in the Supreme Court. By the way, expand the courts. Expand the courts. Expand the courts.
You see what she just did there? That's diversion. That is a way for her to deviate away from the question that she is being asked. So let me try to find a way to get some type of applause or approval from the audience by saying something I know that they all will agree with. And of course, they're all going to agree with the fact that the Supreme Court should be either expanded and there should be term limits. So that is what she is doing there. That is very that's sneaky. That's sneaky. And Colin, notice he didn't yell. He just asked the question. Watch, she's going to go on.
And it's not that radical, y'all. There is precedent. It's been done 6 times before. It's far right, it's extremist, it's imbalanced, and they are causing great harm. That is where the student debt issue is right now. But that being said, we're all organizers, and no organizer goes into a fight without a contingency plan.
We're all organizers. Are they still organizers? Can they still say that? Because when there have been, activities on the outside, people who are organizing on the outside, they're not there. They don't show up. They hide. They hide from their own constituents who disagree with them. I'm going to show you that too as well. So are still organizers? Are all of them still organizers? And if that is the case, what have they been organizing? You see, she's defensive because even though this is a organizing, mobilized event to spread the message on a national level, so to speak, they still have to protect Joe Biden. So Colin's question, if Ayanna Pressley is going to answer that question, which she does not, and answer it truthfully, that is a slap in the face to Joe Biden, and they can't do that. Let's go on.
We have them, but I'm not ready to see defeat here because the legal case is sound. The legal case is sound. So, stay tuned on that because we know that was a motivating issue in the midterms for many. This is a transformational, consequential issue, and we're not giving up this fight.
If the legal case in reference to canceling student debt is sound, then why is Joe Biden and his administration they have already gathered and started talking about when repayments will start? If the legal case is sound. Let's go on.
So in the fact that we made it this far, first they said the president didn't have the authority. Then they said it would be regressive in impact and only benefit white graduate students.
Who's they? This piece right here. I'll tell you who they is. Listen to this. And look at the expression on Ayanna Pressley's face. You can tell she's incredibly defensive here. She doesn't like the fact that Colin asked that question. But she goes on to say, first they tried to tell us that the president could not cancel student debt. Who is they? Listen to this.
For many, this is a transformational, consequential issue, and we're not giving up this fight. So in the fact that we made it this far, first they said the president didn't have the authority.
They is Nancy Pelosi. See, she's trying to make people believe, it was the Supreme Court. But who said it first? Nancy Pelosi said during a press conference live on television that the president does not have the authority to cancel student debt. She said it first. And the Supreme Court basically backed up Nancy Pelosi. Ayanna Pressley knows this. You can't tell me that she doesn't know this. But notice they are not willing to call out anyone by name that is a part of the Democratic Party, because then that hurts them. That hurts their political career. That hurts their seat. That can hurt their chances of getting more book deals, things like that. That's why they don't do it. The only time they seem to be willing to call out another politician who is problematic in reference to progressive issues is if that politician is a Republican, or if it is Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema, because they already have the green light that it's okay to criticize Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. It's okay for them to do that. It is not okay for them to say, well, Nancy Pelosi said that the president doesn't have the authority to cancel student debt. That's why they don't call out by name.
Then they said it would be regressive in impact and only benefit white graduate students who went to affluent schools. And we have challenged and proven all of that wrong. This is a huge coalition of impacted borrowers, civil rights organizations, union workers, presidents, tradesmen and women. But my point is, the progress that has been made is because of the movement. So I'll just close by saying this. It is progress. And it is progress. And listen.
The movement was started by activists on the outside. I interviewed one of the gentlemen that was a part of that movement. Organizations like the Debt Collective, you've probably seen them on Bad Faith. They've been on a couple of shows, actually. But there were multiple organizations on the outside that decided to put that pressure on Joe Biden. And then the politicians followed them up with that. But let's not sit here and pretend like they started the movement, like that Ayanna Pressley and AOC and them started the movement. They did not start the movement. The movement started with the activists on the outside, and they picked it up from there. They go on to say this is progress. They said it is progress. We are getting progress. Right now, nothing has happened. Right now, nothing has happened. Okay. Has your student debt been canceled? My student debt hasn't been canceled. Not 10,000, not 20,000. Right now, it just sits in the courts. So the reason why Colin was asking the question, didn't you tell Joe Biden to do it through the Higher Education Act? Is because that is very important, because Joe Biden did not follow instructions. Joe Biden decided to do this through the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act applied to the pandemic emergency status. When you lift the emergency status, it no longer applies. The emergency status in reference to the pandemic on a national level has been lifted. That's why many people were kicked off Medicaid because of it. She still hasn't answered the question.
60 million people have already benefited from this relief, provided the Supreme Court follows the letter of the law.
No. 40 to 60 people have already benefited. No, they haven't. No one's debt has been canceled. They haven't benefited yet. So I guess she catches herself, and then here she says, providing the Supreme Court follows the letter of the law. Then retract what you said before that, because they have not already benefited. Everyone's sitting around at home, twiddling their thumbs, trying to figure out if they're actually going to have this happen at all.
1 in 4 Black borrowers will have their debt zeroed out completely. This is 40 plus million people that stand for. Do we want more? Do we fight for more? Yes. But Pell Grants are our most burdened recipients. And the fact that $20,000 worth of debt will be canceled for Pell Grant recipients and $10,000 for non-Pell Grant recipients, that is progress.
It still is not progress, because we had a student debt panel on this show. Amani Oakley was one of the panelists on this show. And even Amani Oakley contacted the debt company to ask them what would be paid off first. This is a video. She has this on Twitter. It might still be pinned to her profile. They told Amani Oakley that the interest would be paid off first. So if you have $10,000 in interest, which I know many of you may, that is what will be paid off, and you will still owe what you have on those loans. That came directly from the lenders. What's the progress, people? There are people literally sitting there thinking, oh God, I only have 20,000 left and they're going to pay this out and I'm going to be all set. No, honey. The interest will be paid first. So if you have $20,000 left that you owe in student loans, but let's say you have $8,000 interest, that money, whichever one you qualified for, let's say you qualify for the $10,000, that $8,000, that interest will be paid off first. And then whatever you have left will go towards your remaining balance. People have to understand. Of course, Joe Biden didn't explain that to you, But Imani Oakley did the research.
The legal case is sound. The president has the authority. So let's see what the Supreme Court does. But my point here is,
notice that's the second time she says the legal case is sound. Why does she continue to say that?
as much as I want government to lead, more often than not, government does not lead, but it does respond to pressure.
If they really feel this way, that the government does respond to pressure, then why is it that whenever we've organized on the outside in reference to these progressive policies, you don't see ne'er one of them show up? If that's what they believe. It does respond to pressure. Yes, it can respond to pressure, but you are not present. You are not present in the fight. You run away from the same people who canvassed for you, who voted for you, who donated to you, who phone banked for you, who are out here fighting the fight in the streets, who are doing the protests to try to put that pressure on the Biden administration. And you are not present. The only one of them that showed up to those marches for Medicare for All was Cori Bush. And from what I understand, she made it very clear that she was not happy with what we were doing. How you show up to the event and then you criticize the event? Stay home. Stay home. Where were they? Where were they when there were marches in all these cities across this country, over 50 cities across this country? Where were they? AOC was campaigning for Nina Turner. That's what she was that day. Where was Bernie Sanders? He wasn't there. There was a march in Burlington, Vermont. So don't give me that pushback that, well, they go home on the weekend and the march was on the weekend. They were in over 50 cities. Not one of them. They not present, period.
And so we have to keep it up. So I thank you all for recognizing that movements and revolutions require resources. So we thank you for your investment and we thank you for your solidarity in this movement. The squad is big, y'all.
The resources for the protests and the organizing that were done and led by activists on the outside were already provided. All you had to do was make an appearance or even just tweet it out. Ayanna Pressley, you right here in Boston. There was a Medicare for All march here in Boston. Not only was your office contacted, but Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey, all of you guys were contacted. I know because I worked with the organizer for the event. So it was me and Kyle. So Kyle organized it. And I was the MC. We worked together. Where were you? Where was Elizabeth Warren? Where was Ed Markey? None of you present. None of you tweeted about it. None of you said a damn thing. Bernie Sanders, Medicare for All was your movement. How you let all these marches happen across this country and you don't say one word about it on Twitter? Not one word. So she did not answer his question, but I will. So I tweeted to answer Colin's question. Yes, she did. Ayanna, Warren, and Schumer instructed Biden to cancel student debt through the Higher Education Act. She did not answer the question, and here is the receipt. See, I covered this when this happened. This request was made in February of 2021. So when I went on Jimmy Dore's show, I talked about this. This shit is old. This is not new. February 2021, Warren, Schumer, Pressley colleagues. President Biden can and should use executive action to cancel up to $50,000 in federal student loan debt immediately. And they were asking for more than what was granted, obviously. But here's the piece you need to see right here. Highlight this, and we'll make it larger. Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley led their colleagues in reintroducing their bicameral resolution outlining a bold plan for President Biden to tackle the student loan debt crisis. by using existing authority under the Higher Education Act to cancel up to $50,000 in student loan debt for federal student loan borrowers. So the answer to Colin's question is yes. And Joe Biden decided not to do it. She went all around in circles. She went from Massachusetts to DC to Paris to Spain, and then came back to DC and didn't answer the question. Now, that's one of the videos, but there's more. There's another video here, and this is from Jamal Bowman. And he is basically trying to call out Congress. Now, Colin, again, is going to ask a question. Listen to this. This is why people don't trust politicians.
The majority of Congress does not have a sense of urgency as it relates to doing something about this issue. Everybody's just going about their business, going about their day, in their nice suits, going to fundraisers, raising money, getting reelected, and they're not doing shit.
That includes you. That includes you, Jamal Bowman, because you do the same thing. Remember, we talked about the fundraiser that Jamal Bowman went to. Roger Meadows was at that fundraiser. Lucy was there, and they confronted him about progressive issues and why he's not pushing on issues. He goes to fundraisers too. AOC goes to those fundraisers. All of them go to the fundraisers. So when Jamal Bowman says that the majority of Congress doesn't care or they don't have a sense of urgency, let's go back.
The majority of Congress does not have a sense of urgency as it relates to doing something about this issue.
They also did not have a sense of urgency when it came to forcing the vote for Medicare for all. They didn't have a sense of urgency when it came to even attending these Medicare for all marches, any march for that matter. They didn't have a sense of urgency, but they had a sense of urgency when it came to them voting to send billions of dollars to Ukraine. They showed up for that. They had a sense of urgency about that. But when it came to doing something for the people, the squad also does not have that sense of urgency. If they had a sense of urgency, they would have forced that vote against Nancy Pelosi for Medicare for all. They had none. None.
Everybody's just going about their business, going about their day, in their nice suits, going to fundraisers, raising money, getting reelected, and they're not doing shit. Like, why are we negotiating with them on anything if they don't want to do anything about their guns? Why are we negotiating on any issue?
He's talking about himself. When Jamal Bowman says, why are we negotiating with them on any issue? He's the one doing the negotiating. The squad are the ones, they're the ones doing the negotiating. They're the ones going along with establishment Democrats on issues where they're supposed to push back on. They're supposed to be the progressive voice in the House, and they have chosen to go along with these neoliberal, neocon talking points in legislation. He's talking about himself. And what kills me are the people in the room clapping. Are you not aware? Are you not awake? They are no different. They are no different.
Any issue. If we have people in Congress that are okay with our children being killed and gun violence being the #1 killer of children in America, we have lost our soul as a nation.
Now here they go using Joe Biden talking points. I'm running on the soul of the nation. What is happening? What has happened? What soul? What soul? What is the soul of America? Somebody tell me in the chat. What's the soul? Let me know. Let me know. And I'll get back to you.
And so when I process all of this consciously and subconsciously, before I came out and started yelling at reporters to ask Republicans what the hell are they going to do about gun violence, which is what led to Massey addressing me and then us having that back and forth.
And he's only willing to have that back and forth and to push back on people that, again, that are Republicans. When there are people in his party that are implementing legislation that is not only just dangerous to any type of progressive movement, but hinders any type of progressive movement, there's no voice there. Jamal Bowman is silent. We don't see TikTok videos and YouTube videos of Jamal Bowman confronting Hakeem Jeffries on the issues. They're pals. They're friends. Where's that same type of tug of war with Hakeem Jeffries on Medicare for All, Jamal Bowman? You guys talking about a hip hop bill, hip hop legislation. Where's that confrontation with you and Hakeem Jeffries or Clyburn about Medicare for All? Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist.
But for me, you know, as I hear everyone speak on the issues that we're fighting for, I'm really grateful and appreciative to them and all of us and all of you. But I'm also like, damn, yo, like we gotta take over this whole shit. Like,
we gotta take over the whole ship. And let me tell you what that means. So basically, he's saying they need more of them in the House. They need to take over the House, right? Wasn't that the whole strategy of Justice Democrats, eventually to take it over? But you know what that means? That requires money. Oh, and there was a lot of money to be made for this event. The cheapest ticket price to attend was $25. The highest ticket price was $500. Now, if you're supposed to be the voice of the working class people, why the hell do you even have a ticket price of $500? Because you're not trying to speak to working class people or poor people. People who are poor that don't have $25 to give to attend this event. They missed all of this information. Their voices are not heard, and that is bullshit. That is just another way for you to make more money. Give me more money. Fundraise. We need to get more of us in the House, but we need your money, guys. After you've already donated money to them to get them elected, and you haven't seen them do shit. Let's keep it real. Raise your hand if you canvass for them. Raise your hand if your phone banked for them. And they have the nerve to turn around and ask for more damn money. So you get more people in there just like them to turn around and not do shit. This is a game. That's all this is. This is all about money. If they were serious about organizing, as they say that they are, they would come out into the streets when we are present. They would come to some of these rallies where we are, the organizers and the activists. They would be out there, not just when George Floyd died, but when any other unarmed black man or kid dies in this goddamn country. They are not present, period. And that don't require any goddamn money. And you can tell them I said it. This is a scam. All you're going to do is give them more money, and they are going to continue to disappoint you.
right. And I mean right now, like 2024 is a wrap. Yeah. It's not just taking back the House. We got to grow seats in the Senate.
And if you're going to grow seats in the Senate, then that means even more money. You see how this works, guys? You see how this works?
We've got to drag this 80-year-old man across the finish line of the win.
So he's talking about Joe Biden. We got to drag this old man across the finish line so he can win. Why? Now, you just told everybody you need more of you in the House. So why are you trying to help Joe Biden win? He's not you. He don't agree with your policies. He told you if Medicare for All came across his desk, he would veto it. So why are you trying to drag him across the finish line? Why haven't any of these members of the squad endorsed or supported any of the people running to the left of Joe Biden? Answer that. Answer that. If you guys say you care about these progressive policies and you care about Medicare for all so much, and you still believe in this strategy, why haven't any of them endorsed Marianne Williamson? Now, I don't believe in the strategy anymore, but they do. So if they're really serious about those progressive policies being passed, why haven't they chosen to support or tweet out or endorse Marianne Williamson? If they're serious about, oh, I'm against these wars, why haven't any of them chosen to endorse or support or tweet out about RFK Jr.? Because they're not fucking serious. That's what I want you to understand. They're not serious about any type of progressive policies getting through. They serious about money. They're serious about keeping their damn seat and writing a book. That's it. Period.
Why? Why?
I'm sorry, man, but I'm upset, yo. Because here's the
Why?
other thing, right? It's like,
Why
listen,
Biden?
I know, right?
Why?
I know. And maybe
That's Colin that you hear in the background who's saying why. Hold on. There we go.
drag this 80-year-old man across the finish line of the win.
Why? Why? Why?
I'm sorry, man, but
Why?
I'm upset, yo. Because
Why?
here's
Why?
the other thing, right? It's like,
Why
listen,
Biden?
I know, right?
Why?
I know. And maybe it should be one of us.
Maybe it should be one of us, but you're not supporting anybody that's running to the left of Joe Biden. They're full of shit. They're full of it. Now, there's another clip here where AOC talks about the devastation of the pandemic on her district in particular. Listen to this.
And what we saw at that time was out of the top 10 zip codes in the United States afflicted with COVID, 5 of them were in my congressional district. It was all hands on deck. And at that time, because it was so early, it was before the public health data had come in, it was before we knew almost anything. And there were organizers and people on the ground that were saying, this disease, this illness is not hitting all of us the same. It is hitting marginalized communities more. It is hitting Black communities more. It's hitting brown communities more. It's hitting the working class more.
And on that note, if you knew that, then why didn't you force the vote against Nancy Pelosi for Medicare for all during a time when those marginalized communities were impacted more so during the pandemic? If you knew that.
There are folks on the ground that saw this and knew this and rang the alarm about it before any public health data came out. And they said, so presciently, they said, we need to act on this now, because once people find out that this is not hitting all of us the same, they're not going to want to act on it. There's going to be less urgency. We found out that some people are more protected than others.
And we found out that there was less urgency when it came to all of you too, because you didn't push for anything during that time when your communities were impacted.
So there was this moment, I remember, all of us were a part of it, where we were on these emergency calls, and it was almost it was such a dark time, but it was also a suspended reality, because there was a moment where everybody, all Democrats of all ideologies and Republicans, were almost willing to entertain anything, from universal basic income to mortgage freezes to freezing our credit scores. They put all of it on the table because they thought they were at risk too. All of a sudden, people with the most privilege and power thought they were in the same boat as the people who were most vulnerable. And when they were in that boat, they were willing to do anything.
And if they were willing to do anything, then why didn't you have that push for Medicare for all? See, they tell on themselves. They tell on themselves. And Indie News Network also tweeted this as well and said, they tweeted her quote and said, people with the most privilege and power thought they were in the same boat as the people who were most vulnerable during the pandemic. When they were in that boat, they were willing to do anything. So Jimmy Dore was right to demand you all to force the vote. Right. Now, it gets worse because apparently AOC had a town hall scheduled for today, and Jose, along with his friend Nogatone and Lucy, who you guys know also from Indie News Network, they tried to go to the town hall and something happened. Now, you know, Jose has been vocal about how he feels about AOC. So has Lucy has confronted AOC. Lucy lives in lives in AOC's district. Lucy canvassed for AOC, and AOC doesn't even want to talk to her own constituents that actually volunteered for her. Let me show you what happened when they showed up to the town hall today. So Jose says both Nogatone, who's a constituent, and myself are also not allowed into AOC's town hall. We were all singled out, which goes to show how scared she really is. And so Lucy tweeted here, I am now banned from AOC's town halls. Listen to this.
Hang out here if you want.
Well, why can't he go in?
I'm telling you can't go in. That's why.
Why is that?
Because I'm telling you they can't go in.
So he's not allowed in?
Yes, he's not allowed in.
Why?
I'm telling you he's not allowed in.
Why?
I don't have to give a reason. I'm telling you he's not allowed in. So that's the reason. If you want to hang out here, hang out here. Thank you.
It's just kind of ridiculous to me. They're not giving me any kind of reason whatsoever. They just escorted me out. I registered for this. I'm a constituent, and they're not allowing me in.
Unfortunately, I do not personally make the rules. It's their event, and they can invite or uninvite whoever. But you can wait over here for now. Maybe they'll change something.
Okay.
No problem.
Hang out here if you want.
Well, why can't he go in?
So they wouldn't allow him to go in. So it seems like Jose and Lucy and his friend Nogatone, it seems like they have been put on a list. A do not allow them in list. Now, Jose went on to say, this is interesting. Let's see if she'll recognize my new disguise. And then he went on to say, and worst of all, we were making small talk with people who were not at all with us. They were turned away. Now I know, this is the important part. Now I know why she didn't let us in, because she didn't want to be called out for another military recruitment fair. This was passed out at her town hall. So here we go for the people who have these questions. Let me come here. Service Academy nominations. So here we go again. I'm going to try to read this. It's tiny. Representative AOC may nominate candidates for the service academies that require a congressional nomination. Tuition is free. However, attendance at an academy comes with the commitment to serve for a minimum of 5 years upon graduation. So remember, I debunked this before because I do know people that went to West Point, that went to the Air Force Academy. That is one of the nominations that you can have, but it's not required. So you see this, even if it was required and they changed the rules, AOC does not have to be the one to do it if she said that these military academies should not be recruiting these high school students. Those were her words, not mine, when she was running for office. So here she is again, funneling teenagers into the military industrial complex. People, you can continue to try to defend this, but you lost with me, okay? She does not have to be the one to do it. You stand on your principles. If you said that you don't want military and military academies coming into the high schools and recruiting these teenagers, then you do not have to be the politician who gives them the nomination. It's that easy. This is disgusting. And you guys, people who defending her, you got to stop defending her. And then he went on to say, yes, we had someone in vid coming soon. And listen to this. Another confirmation that AOC had her goons looking out for me. Our friend Rachel, who intervened, called me and told me what she heard. Listen to this, guys. I told you guys.
Wait, okay, so just say that, repeat that again. I'm recording this now. So you were at the event, right? And you were in line, and then tell me what you heard the security say.
One of them said he was going to go downstairs and make sure that certain people that didn't come in that weren't supposed to. And they said, one of them said, oh, yeah, we already got one of them. And then they said, well, did you see the other one? They said, yeah, he left too.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Wait, okay, so just say that, repeat that.
So AOC, she's at this event in DC, the one that Colin went to, and they're supposed to be talking about organizing and mobilizing. But here it is. She doesn't even want to talk to her own damn constituents unless they agree with her. They don't want to hear from you if you disagree. Look at how cocky they are now. Can you believe it? Can you believe they're the same people that ran in 2018? They're cocky. They're rude. You can't disagree with them. Pathetic. Pathetic. I should have known anything that Cenk Uygur was a part of was a fucking scam. I should have known. But there's more. Because you see, one of the questions that has been coming up is, do the establishment Democrats actually fear the squad? Now, shout out to Roger Meadows because he sent me this. This was actually on Breaking Points. This is Ryan Grimm. He actually discovered something. There is a group that has been trying to push a more centrist direction. They've even considered recruiting someone like Joe Manchin to run for president, to take those votes away from someone that is running on what they consider to be the extreme left or the extreme right. And you end up with a Joe Manchin. That is what they figure. But the question that Ryan did ask is, why are they not, using like these PACs, so to speak, like AIPAC, to push back against those progressive politicians that are in office? And you need to hear what they said. This is interesting.
Right. Ryan, what are you taking a look at? So when it comes to Democratic Party politics, big money made a huge comeback in 2022, more than matching the surge in small dollar contributions that had been kicked off by the Bernie Sanders campaign back in 2015 and that threatened to reshape the party. Now, one of the leaders of the big money counter-revolution is not a household name. He's a tech executive named Dmitry Melhorn, whose largest source of power comes from his connection to his college classmate, Reid Hoffman, the billionaire founder of LinkedIn, who, as Sagar was mentioning earlier on the show, financed the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit and otherwise has spent tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars on Democratic Party politics and going after Trump. But Dmitry, as Democratic insiders all call him, using only his first name, has been good at organizing other like-minded mega donors as well, which means that he can now move tens of millions of dollars with the flick of a wrist. He has directed much of that money in alliance with the group Democratic Majority for Israel, targeting progressive Democrats in primaries, burying them under an avalanche of super PAC spending. So I interviewed him for my podcast, Deconstructed, which came out this weekend, and he laid out his explanation for why it is that he's been so heavily invested in undermining the left. And I asked him if he was going to continue that crusade in 2024, and his answer, I think, was revealing. Take a listen to this.
Okay, so he's asking this gentleman, is he going to continue to try to push forth these PACs to undermine the left, the progressives? Listen to this shit.
How are you thinking about 2024 Democratic primaries? Do you guys feel like, and I've written about this before, but mainstream Democrats, the group that you mentioned, plus Democratic Majority for Israel, which works very closely with mainstream Democrats, really kind of transformed what was possible for, I think, progressive left-wing candidates in Democratic primaries in the last cycle. I'm curious if you think you have essentially tamed the left to the point where you're kind of moving on from Democratic primaries, or are you guys gearing up for another test in 2024, that if you see progressive candidates that you think are too progressive popping up, that the super PACs are going to come out guns blazing on them?
I think we're okay now. If you run a no-labels centrist like a Joe Manchin in every state, you will split the anti-Trump coalition, and therefore Trump will win.
This sounds a little bit similar to what Andrew Yang said with his Forward Party, that they were looking for that centrist candidate, so to speak. That's what this no labels group reminds me of. But notice he said, I think we're okay now, in reference to pushing those PACs to stop progressives. Why would he say that? Let's go on.
Risk. And I think it's a huge risk. It is one of the top 5 ways that Trump could get reelected is if Nancy Jacobson and Mark Penn and Joe Lieberman continue in this path and put this ballot line in every state. When they launched this effort, this absurd, venal effort, one of the things that they did in their video promotion is they talked about how bad the two parties were, and the visual images they included were Donald Trump on the right and AOC on the left. And so they're ignoring the existence of Biden. Now, I don't think it works. I actually think No Labels has a real risk of collapsing in this effort, and I hope that they do. And I think that in general, if you listen to the way Bernie Sanders is talking about endorsing Joe Biden, I am quite confident right now that the actual extremes of the left are pretty severely marginalized. That's in general. At the margins, it's a little bit like, for example, when a judge gave a ruling that was really unhelpful. This is the judge with the abortion pill, and AOC comes out and says we should just ignore the ruling. Like, AOC is siding with JD Vance. The two of them are both like, yeah, rulings that we don't like, we shouldn't do. And it makes it hard to build a coalition of donors around the rule of law. But in terms of general voters, I don't think it's a problem anymore. And I don't think we need to do more to fight back against it at the moment.
Well,
he doesn't think it's an issue anymore and they don't need to fight back against it. And he points out the fact that AOC was siding with JD Vance, who was a Trump candidate, by the way, in reference to that particular issue. They did what they needed to do. They already did the suppressing that they could do. But listen to this.
They're good news and bad news for the left. They won't get bombed by super PACs, but that's because they've been thoroughly beaten down to the ground.
Yes.
There you go.
There you go. Congratulations.
So 2 things to talk about here. Let's do the left first and then do the no label stuff. Because the no label stuff is newsy because he's one of the biggest money men in Democratic politics, and to have him kind of crusading against this no labels effort is interesting. But on the point about the left, what could be more demoralizing than having your opponent say out loud that they're not even worried about you anymore? Like, you've been so smashed that, you know what, you guys can do your thing and we'll be annoyed every now and then by your tweets, but we're not even going to bother organizing big money against you.
Don't they do it because, I mean, why would they? Like, AOC said she would back Biden. Bernie Sanders endorsed Joe Biden immediately, like didn't even hold on for a second. All of them, I haven't seen a peep from a single progressive Democratic lawmaker who has even advocated for the debate. Not even said like, okay, what if you're like, yeah, I support Joe Biden, but he shouldn't be a corner.
Oh, you'd be shouted down, like,
you'd be killed. You'd be killed. Right.
And so they, in the last cycle.
It's interesting to hear that come from Sauger. Why would they consider them to be a threat when they're going along with the establishment Democrats? That's the point that they're trying to make. They're not a threat, guys.
A bunch of candidates, progressive candidates, did make it through this kind of DMFI and Reid Hoffman gauntlet, but a lot of them did it by really trimming their sails, particularly on Israel-Palestine, and signing statements saying, like, I denounce BDS. I have never supported BDS. If I did, that was somebody else that supported it. Fetterman, literally, which in my interview, he says they came very close to endorsing Connor Lamb, and because Connor Lamb was begging them for super PAC spending. Fetterman literally let DMFI edit his statement on Israel-Palestine. Like, just campaign, just tell us what you want us to say.
Why do they care so much about Israel? Not the Democratic majority for Israel. Reid Hoffman and all of them. Like,
I think so.
Or
Dimitri, it's interesting and worth exploring more.
I just don't get this.
But they have teamed up with DMFI. Like, they have the same consultants. Mark Mellman does the polling for mainstream Democrats. Reid Hoffman and Dimitri just seem to like kind of appreciate their political sensibilities. But it does raise a question, like, okay, your main issue is that you think Trump is, and we could talk about this too, that Trump is a disease. Like, that's Dimitri's kind of fundamental kind of analysis, that Trump is not the symptom of a broader thing, but Trump is the disease itself. So the only thing that matters is going after Trump. And I was like, but then why are you spending tens of millions of dollars on Israel-Palestine? Like, that doesn't quite square.
Doesn't square at all. I always.
So the progressives, they turned out to not be progressive on Israel and Palestine. They really aren't taking the progressive position when it comes to war. They weren't taking the progressive position when they voted to, some of them voted to fund the Capitol Police when it comes to policing. They're not using the phrase defund the police anymore because the Democratic establishment doesn't want you to use it. And Nancy Pelosi said that's not the way that the party is going to go. So there's no need for Dimitri or that group, No Labels, to put up big PAC money against those progressives because they are not considered a threat. And if they're not considered a threat, then why are they there? So there you go. So when you think about that event that Colin attended, when you think about how AOC is preventing Jose and his friend Nogatone and Lucy from going to AOC's town halls and events anymore, these people aren't a threat anymore. They finally pulled the mask off fully. I mean, a lot of us, some of us have been talking about this before, but fully to the point that you can just see that at the end of the day, they are a part of the establishment PMC class. That is where they come from, most of them. And they're not really trying to fight for you. They're not trying to fight for working class people, poor people. They get in where to fit in. They have their spot, and it's a done deal. Anytime they're telling you that they don't want to put up big PAC money against them because they're not considered a threat, then that means they know that they're going along to get along now. Sorry, but I think everybody needed to hear that. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Just came from the AOC event. See, here we go. But got there late when everyone was leaving, those outside or protesters. Lucy and Jose left before I got there after having their First Amendment rights violated and was locked outside despite Lucy being a constituent. Outside the protesters, 20s through 40s. People passing, coming out, most were older and couldn't be bothered. One young person who didn't know why the protest, I talked to him for about a half an hour after I asked him what he knew about Ukraine, and he only knew what MSM told him when I got done with him and showed him the 2018 letter by Congress of the Nazi element in Ukraine, NATO 2014 coup. Also talked him into signing up under no party, gave him a voter registration form, and convinced him we don't need parties. He agreed and told him about congressional ballot initiatives and becoming a CBI state worker co-ops. He agreed. I got the video. And thank you for this as well. The New York Health Act outlaws private health insurance from operating in New York State. AOC didn't even support that. De Blasio ended qualified immunity for the NYPD before he left. No one has tested this against the NYPD yet. Guys, next time try to get the badge numbers because they just violated your First Amendment rights. You can actually sue them for that. While you're at it, you can sue AOC for doing the same. Let's call New York State ACLU. Go ahead and smash that like button, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so. That helps me with the algorithm. And I'm going to go to some of the other comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Justice Dems was a scam from the jump. It was intended to misdirect delusion Bernie supporters from supporting Stein in the general election. I really do think it was a scam from the get-go, looking back on it. Thank you for the super chat, Mr. Missin. They is them. Ilhanner says, well, you can't call out the people you work for. And thank you, Random Nobody. I'm ready whenever the rest of you are. Thank you, David. All the squad represents is funneling of movements and leftist energy back into a corrupt party that will continue to ignore the constituents. Facts. Shout out to Hardlands Media. What's up, kid? Says, keep speaking the truth, Sabby. Thank you, John. The soul of our nation is the bottom of our shoes, of their shoes, as they try to put it on our throats. And thank you, Seeking Freedom. As a Black person himself, how dare he say that? The soul, TF. They are all a bunch of sellouts. I hear you. And shout out to Seeking Freedom for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. All right, we are moving on to our next story, and this one is about Jimmy Dore. I don't know if you heard about this, but a couple of months ago, I actually told you a story about Roger Waters his name was put on a Ukrainian kill list. So at first I thought this was just a rumor, and then I did a little bit of digging, and it turns out, no, this actually does exist. So Roger Waters, someone who is a musician, was put on that list because he was speaking out against the war in Ukraine and calling for peace. And like I said before, even if you call for peace, some people will still try to smear you as a Putin puppet, so to speak. Well, now Jimmy Dore apparently has been put on that same list. This is crazy. Listen to this.
I am now officially a part of the Ukraine kill list, right? So the Ukraine government has this website, and anybody who tells the truth about the war in Ukraine, they put them on a kill list, and they actually kill some of them. And I'll just show you what it says on here. Here's what it says up here. It says it's non-government Center for Research of Signs of Crimes Against the National Security of Ukraine, Peace, Humanity, and the International Law. Information for law enforcement authorities and special services about pro-Russian terrorists, separatists, mercenaries, war criminals, and murderers. So that's what.
So is Jimmy any of those things? It's not just him. There's a couple others that are on this list too. I'm going to tell you about that I found out about recently. But like, is he a terrorist, a separatist, a mercenary, a war criminal, or a murderer? Like, that's the funny part.
That's what they say we are. And so there it is. That's my close up. It's not a horrible picture. Dissemination of Kremlin So then what does it say here? It says dissemination of Kremlin propaganda narratives with an aim of receiving financial compensation from the aggressor country. Justification and informational support of fascist Russia's open attack on Ukraine. And
has Jimmy been paid by Russia? Like, this is just interesting.
And then there's the big page, and it lists all my YouTube stuff that I've when I've told the truth about Ukraine. They list them. That's their evidence for me being a bad person that should be killed. And then down here, it says this. It says the Peacemaker Center asks law enforcement agencies to consider this publication on this site as a statement that this citizen committed a deliberate act against the national security of Ukraine, peace, the security of humanity, and the international legal order, as well as other offenses. Now, this guy, what's his name? David Miller wrote an article about this list. And in it, he says that, so why do they have this list? He says the issue of Nazism in Ukraine will be seen in retrospect as a defining issue of our era. And it is important to remember that the reason I and many others are threatened by the Ukraine government and their NATO backers is because we, in turn, threaten to expose them for what they are, Nazi collaborators. And that's what the Ukraine government is. As it turns out, the Covert Kill List website is a product of the Ukraine regime, effectively funded by the CIA, among others, and is hosted by NATO.
Yeah. So here we have government agencies that are a part of this website. We should not be surprised by this point, especially when we look at some of the things that were revealed during like the Twitter files. But here we go. So it's not just him. Like, I think Jackson Hinkle at one point was on this list. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous, like how they just come up with these things. But what's interesting to me with Jimmy Dore being on this list is that Jimmy Dore is a comedian. It's just, he's an entertainer. That was some of the things I thought about too with Roger Waters. Roger Waters is an entertainer. He is a musician. Why are they going after people? It's really weird to me. Why are you going after comedians and musicians and putting them on this list? They're not politicians. They don't consider themselves to be journalists. What does Jimmy always say? He's a comedian in his garage. Like, it is very weird to me. Very strange.
Yes.
One extraordinary thing is that the many American citizens, including ex-military and intelligence operatives, are included, as well as significant numbers of citizens of NATO member countries. Perhaps the most remarkable element is that NATO has hosted the site and a collection of affiliated websites on its servers in Brussels. At the same time as NATO think tank, the Atlantic Council boasts that Henry Kissinger is on its board of directors, NATO also hosts a kill list website on which Kissinger appears. So let me bring in Max Blumenthal, who's also on this list, and along with Aaron Mate, who also works at the Gray Zone. And so NATO's hosting this. It's funded by the CIA. Is that true?
Well, I'm actually not on the list, which kind of makes me worried.
Oh, I thought you were on this list. Just Aaron is on it?
Anya.
Aaron and Anya Parampil,
okay,
our other colleague at the Gray Zone, recently appeared on it just days before you appeared. So
I wonder who goes about making the decisions in reference to who's going to appear on that list. It's really weird that Max wasn't on there. Not saying he needs to be, not saying he needs to be, but that's kind of weird because obviously he founded the Gray Zone. Like the talking points are pretty much similar in reference to this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. So it's kind of weird to me that he wasn't on that list, but I don't know who makes that decision, but it's just really weird that this exists anyway. Why does the CIA and NATO have their hand in this website, basically saying that certain people should be killed because of the talking points that they have? This is how corrupt these agencies are in our country. And I wish more people would expose this and talk about this. You know, I've said this before. We had the Twitter files. There needs to be YouTube files, the Facebook files. All of it needs to be done. But this is very concerning. Very concerning.
they're going after more American public figures and journalists than ever before. And
go ahead.
You know, they say in the upper right-hand corner of the site, if you just go to Mirot Voretz, the Peacemaker website, it says Langley, Virginia, but I don't know if that's just like a troll or what. I don't know who's actually maintaining it. I've seen a lot of evidence that the servers are in Brussels. What's clear to me is that the Ukrainian government, it's not clear to me, this is just a fact. Elements in the Ukrainian government openly support and promote and participate in the maintenance of this website, this malicious website. One figure is named Anton Gerashenko. He is a special advisor to the Interior Ministry, which oversees the Ukrainian SBU, which is the security services that maintain the death squads that go out and kill suspected collaborators, disappear political dissidents, terrorize elements of the population, political opposition, in a completely autocratic society run by Vladimir Zelensky. And that the Ukrainian government and the SBU, well, first of all, the SBU was trained by the CIA after 2014, after this US-backed coup, and the Ukrainian government is like funded directly by us. So, I mean, just based on what's publicly known, we are behind this. And my personal opinion is that this website, and there are other initiatives of the Ukrainian government that have targeted me, are like a proxy for the US or UK governments to attack their own citizens without having to do it directly.
There you go. And then I want to mention this piece here. Thank you so much, Denise. The Kill List website also lists itself as being in Langley, Virginia. Langley is an Air Force where I live and is connected to the NASA, NASA. I need to do some digging to see if the CIA is also there. So Langley, Virginia, this is also the same address where some of those NAFO troll accounts that you see on Twitter, some of them, like if you click on their Twitter profile, it'll say Langley, Virginia. So yeah. And they're the ones that also, they were mass reporting people on Twitter that had a different narrative about this war with Russia and Ukraine. They've come after like multiple people and people I know as well. So yeah, deep state. Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So he actually went into a little bit of detail. I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but I'll give you a little bit of it. He says, let's start with the Kill List website itself. Myro Trevets Today, it's located at myrotrevets.center, but it was originally at psb4ukr.org. That domain was first registered on the 14th of August, 2014, some 6 months after the U.S.-backed Maidan coup that overthrew the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych. 3 people are associated with these domains, and they provide valuable clues to who and what was involved in the kill list site. They are Victor Garber, a longstanding Maidan activist and co-coordinator of the Maidan Monitoring Information Center. He was the first registrant of Myrotrevets domain. That's the kill list website. And August of 2014, he had previously owned the domain of Maidan Monitoring from 2001.
I just want to explain that for a second for people who are not familiar with like how domains work. So like, for example, for my email address, I had to actually register a domain first. My email address was attached to my former website, yada, yada. You don't need to know the whole story. Anywho, so the domain belongs to me. Like, and I pay for that domain. So when you email me at sabrinasalvati@sabbysabs.com, I pay for that every month. Like, it is a domain, right? So the thing is, typically whoever the domain belongs to, that's typically the person who created the site. Typically, that's how that would work. And then he also went on to say that he was the first registrant on the website. So that's just another clue to let you know it probably came from him. Okay, it probably came from him. So let's go on here.
Group also has it has been in existence since before the so-called Orange Revolution in 2004. It was, of course, funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, the foundation known as the CIA Sidekick, and the International Renaissance Fund, the Ukraine branch of the Open Society Foundation run by George Soros. Myrotrevets.
So there's George Soros. He has his hand in something else. I told you guys, like, he's not just funding the Democratic Party. He's funding a narrative. That's another billionaire.
Lists thousands of saboteurs, separatists, and terrorists and traitors. Sometimes it has crossed out their photographs once they have been killed with the label liquidated. This, for instance, happened after the murder of Daria Dugina in Moscow in August of 2022. Today, the Myrotrevets site houses links to 2 other domains which appear to be integral parts of the operation. So it is the Ukraine government. They are targeting people. This is funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a CIA cutout. So this is our own tax dollars being used to target journalists in the United States.
And not even just journalists, but comedians and musicians. That's the part that really like boggles my mind, is like, you guys put Roger Waters on that list. You guys put Jimmy Dore on that list. Like, this is ridiculous. This is insane. Like, and again, you have to understand that the majority of Americans don't know who Jimmy Dore is. Even though like Jimmy's channel has like millions, of subscribers, the majority of Americans don't know who he is. The majority of Americans are not watching independent media. So you have to keep that in mind. Roger Waters on another level, that's different. But I mean, it's so random and so weird that you would put entertainers on that list. But you also have to remember that these agencies like the CIA, they can go by different names. They can call themselves, like, I don't know, the Langley Group, and infiltrate. They're not going to infiltrate or be a part of something like this kill list website and use the name the CIA. They'll call it something else. Just something to keep in mind. I see Colin is in the chat. What's up, Colin? Great job, Colin.
This seems like it would be a big story, except the people who can make it a big story, the people in the corporate press, aren't ever going to be on that list, so they don't care, right?
No, they're going to be honoring the government behind that list. I mean, this is sick. In 2015, a very popular journalist, commentator in Ukraine, who condemned the Maidan coup. It was an undemocratic, violent coup that started Ukraine on the path to war, civil war, and a direct war with Russia. he was murdered in the streets of Kiev by neo-Nazis who were acting on behalf of the Ukraine security services. And he was targeted by that website, Mirot Vorets. They marked him off. Then we saw in 2022, as David Miller mentioned in that article, Daria Dugina, who is a commentator and the daughter of a famous Russian nationalist philosopher named Alexander Dugin, who the whole Western press would say was Putin's brain, even though it's unclear if they ever even met or if he was even very influential in Russia. He was targeted with a car bomb. She happened to be in the car that these Ukrainian terrorists targeted. And so they killed her, and she was kind of an up-and-coming geopolitical commentator who has appeared a lot in international media. So they mark off on this website, liquidated months.
This is scary. This is scary. Now, I'm not going to play the entire video because it was also brought to my attention when I saw that they said also, oh, let me get this, also that Aaron and Anya were also put on this list as well. And then I saw this video on Gray Zone. Not going to play the whole video, but I do want to play a clip from this, that they were also added to this list. Now, they're journalists, they're not entertainers, but listen to this bit.
Okay, well, Aaron, moving right along. You're not popular in Kiev.
I'm not, no. Myself and another gray zone. Kiev, yes, in Kiev. Myself and another gray zone colleague, Anya Parmpil, we just apparently got added to the what's called the Ukraine kill list. This is a list maintained by. This comes from the. I haven't followed this too closely. This comes from the Ukrainian government, right? This list.
Yeah, I mean, the Ukrainian Interior Ministry supports this list. Someone who's listed as an advisor to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry, his name is Anton Gerashenko, and he's played a particularly pernicious role in the post-Maidan government ever since 2015, 2014, is an open supporter of this website, and he participates in the blacklisting, and he helps propagate, names. If someone gets added to it, he'll put it out on his own Telegram channels and the Interior Ministry's channels. And it definitely works with the Ukrainian SBU security services.
So I just want to add something here. When we go back to the Twitter files, remember all of the different documents and people that was revealed that government agencies told Twitter executives to censor, right? So if you hear about this website called the Ukrainian Kill List website, one may wonder, well, why hasn't this website been censored? Why wasn't there a call to censor it? But then when you understand that the CIA is also a part of it and that NATO is a part of it, that's why it has not been called to be censored. Interesting how that works, right? See, when they're a part of it, when these agencies are a part of it, regardless if it's bad or it could cause a harm, right? If you have a website with a list of people that you are basically promoting to be killed, that can cause bodily harm, correct? Okay. But see, this is how it works. The narrative that they want to get across to people is allowed to continue to be posted. Those websites are allowed to exist. The articles are allowed to exist because that's the narrative that the CIA, NATO, FBI, all of these groups want to be pushed. What is not allowed to exist are websites and articles and videos that discuss a narrative that they do not want to reach the masses. And that is the information that will be censored. So when people use the excuse that those government agencies, in reference to the Twitter files, they were calling on them to censor things that actually should have been censored because it can cause harm. That was one of the things that was mentioned in the congressional hearing. I call BS on that because this website can directly cause harm, but it still exists because the CIA is a part of it. And that's the narrative that they want to exist. That's how it works.
Beyond that, Aaron, it's kind of a mystery. It lists Langley, Virginia as one of its locations in the upper right-hand corner of the site, but it's sort of a mystery who's behind this.
Yeah, well, that's where. Well, let's take a look. I mean, so both Anya and I don't know when this happened, but both Anya and I were recently added to it. I don't know why you didn't make it, Max. You must be feeling a little left out. But
I do.
So Dwayne responded. Dwayne said Max's father is Sidney Blumenthal. That's why. That could be why. That could be why. But yeah, this is interesting.
I mean, that was my first reaction.
Yeah, there's Anya.
They at least chose a decent photo of her.
Yeah, there it is. So there's Anya on the list. And who else is on this list? I know Roger Waters was on this.
Well, can we get yours up there?
Scott Ritter, yeah. Let's get mine as well. Let's see here. So that was Anya's, and this is mine. Yeah, there it is. You know what's funny about mine is, okay, so
see your photo isn't as
yeah, well, my photo's not very flattering, but
kind of
what's
like
funny is so it lists all these little screenshots of purported statements of mine. What's funny is they take most of them from a Telegram channel.
Pause. So this one right here says, where is the U.S. peace proposal for Ukraine? The U.S. just wants to escalate, not negotiate. So that means someone should be killed? This is what I was telling you in reference to the call for peace. Even people who have been calling for peace, they're still trying to smear them as Putin puppets. Because the Ukrainian government they're not looking for no peace. They're not looking for no peace. Zelensky's not looking for no peace. He's looking for money.
That's in my name, but that's not even me. Like whoever's running my Telegram channel is a scammer. They've taken my name and they take my tweets sometimes and they put out what I say.
Someone did that to me too, by the way. I had to address it on this show because they were asking people for money. So don't ever, first of all, I'm rarely ever go on Telegram. If you see something from my account asking you to donate money for a giveaway or whatever, I don't do giveaways on this channel. I never have. I never will. That's not like my thing. So just ignore it and don't respond and do not give the money. I would never ask you for money via social media. And honestly, I've never asked you for money on the show. I am going to soon, though, for a fundraiser, but that will be through GoFundMe. That would never be done through social media. So just FYI.
But sometimes they put in stuff I don't say in my name. And they'll also put up ads for whatever supplements and things I do not endorse. So yeah, they're just they're using my Telegram channel. So sometimes these Telegram shots are stuff I put on Twitter, but sometimes they're not. So anyway, that's just a minor detail, but it's just kind of funny that their sourcing is not even so solid here. But that's, of course, not the most important fact of this. It's just the fact is they're putting our names on a list of people who purportedly they want to harm, right? That's the point of this list, I imagine.
Yeah, that's the list's open intention.
Yeah.
And so that's the point. You guys can watch the full video on Gray Zone, but that's the point. It's okay for that to exist, and they're calling for people to be harmed, but it's okay for it to exist because it goes with the narrative that the CIA and NATO want. Isn't that crazy? It's very weird. Very weird. I was telling a friend of mine about that website before. By the way, most of my friends are not into this at all. They may watch me every now and then on independent media, but for the most part, most of them don't even watch the news. They had never heard of this website before, and they were very taken aback. They were definitely taken aback by that. Okay, but that's crazy, and that's happening. That's what's happening. Shout out to Mint Press News for revealing that information because they were the ones that revealed it. Thank you for the super chat, Solomon. Thank you, Sabby AOC. She is fake. Everybody knows. Yes, we do. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Sabby, Jimmy, and Russell for speaking truth to this perversion of power we call our corrupt government. Gamer says, at Randy Bray and Hello Kids. Kids are also on that list? That's terrible. You see this, guys? Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Twitter temp suspended me for calling Nance a coon. What? Oh, Twitter temporarily suspended you for calling. Who's Nance? Nancy? Why'd you do that, Roger? And thank you for this. That was a couple of months back. I'm good. Okay. All right, cool. That's interesting. Oh boy. Oh dear. Okay. What, Alex? Lots of kids on the. That's terrible, you guys. Oh, but see, you can do that. All right, guys. One more story for you. Go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algo. And then I do want to go ahead and tell you about the chapter event that is starting, because I do not want to forget to mention that. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Present. Ta-da! All right, guys, we are starting the RBN local chapter. So I'm just going to talk about the Boston chapter. I am planning on the first event being a barbecue. Now, I was hoping to do this in June. June's already looking a little bit crazy, so that event may have to be in July sometime. If you are in the Boston area, stay tuned tomorrow. I am going to send out instructions via my newsletter. There'll be a link for a Google form for you to fill out if you want to volunteer and be a part of the Boston chapter. I am looking for people to help me, obviously, with the barbecue event. This can be indoors or outdoors. We all got to work together and collaborate on it. But I will start a GoFundMe for my chapter to fundraise for that event and future events as well. What am I looking for? I am looking for people in the long term that can help people in areas in the Boston area that typically would cost money. So what am I talking about here? Some of the things I'm looking for someone that can teach finance literacy. I think that's very important, and I think it's underserved, particularly in working class communities. So you would teach this once a month, right? I'm looking for you to do whatever class or seminar you sign up to do once a month. Let's just start out with that, because we're all busy people. It just is what it is. Financial literacy. I'm looking for someone to do self-help and self-care, to teach people how to take care of themselves, right? A lot of us have stress and all that jazz. People may want to do things like yoga, but they can't afford to do it. These things aren't usually cheap. So I'm looking for that. So financial literacy, self-help, self-care. And then obviously, me coming from education, I would teach the course. I don't really want to call it a course, but I would do a session about higher education alternatives. So for people who have kids that are in high school and they can't afford to send them to college and they don't want to take out mounds of student loan debt, there are other options and alternatives that I'm very familiar with. So I would be responsible for that. Another thing I would like to do, and you guys, if you have more ideas, you can let me know. But another thing I would like to do is, obviously, I want to do food drives. Now, I'm not sure how often we'll be able to do it. That depends on the fundraising, but people need to eat. We need to feed people, and grocery prices are still expensive, particularly here in Eastern Massachusetts. So we want to help people with that as well as a clothing drive, food drive. And this will take us into the winter season, where we're going to want to get winter gear for people: coats and boots and hats and gloves. Socks is one of the most demanded items at homeless shelters. People don't have socks. So that's very important as well. And then there was another one I wanted to do in reference to the Boston chapter. Each of us are trying to tailor these chapters to our area. So different cities have different needs. In Boston, there's a lot of highly educated people here, but there's also a significant portion of the working class that has kind of been pushed into the shadows, so to speak, honestly, how I feel. Whereas it used to be a working class city. So they're surrounded by people that went to these elite academic institutions, but a lot of times they can't even get their foot in the door because it's too expensive to get in, even if they have the grades or the SAT scores. So these are things that we want to help with. But the very first event is the barbecue. And I'm looking to do that particularly in somewhere like Jamaica Plain or Roxbury area. I'm leaning more towards JP because there's more greenery there. They have more parks in JP. Also, parking's free in JP. Let's just keep it real. Dorchester's another option as well, Danny. Parking might be tough. I have to look into that, but I definitely would need some help. So that is getting started. So if you follow my newsletter, which I think a lot of you do anyway, you'll get that notification from me tomorrow. My newsletter goes straight to your email. And then you'll see all the instructions and things to do to sign up if you want to volunteer. I also had some college students reach out to me about this as well that really want to get involved. So I'm super pumped, but these are the chapters. So obviously we have Detroit. Rome is actually fundraising right now to go back to Jacksonville, Florida to help people there. Follow Rome on Twitter because that's where he does a lot of his fundraising, so you can find out about his events. He's also still working on the library in Detroit. Nick has Kansas City. CJ has Long Beach. JB Orlando. Like I said, all of our cities have different needs. So I think that's right, Tia. Yes, JP, awesome. I have to check and see if Dad has your newsletter. Yes, my newsletter. Eric, if you can find the link for it real quick and put it in the chat to the newsletter so people, if they're not subscribed, but it's also in the details portion of every video where I have all those links that can kind of drive people crazy. But it's also in that part as well. But people need help. And right now we're heading into the summer in Boston. This is the great time to get it started because we have long winters here. We don't have like a long summer to do a lot of these outdoor events. So we really need to get up and moving now before winter hits and it starts snowing and people don't want to come outside. It's just the reality of the situation. So definitely excited about that and ready to get pumped. And any other things. So if you're a volunteer, we'll meet like once a month. You guys, this is a horizontal thing. So I don't want you to feel like I'm telling you what to do. We're all supposed to get together and collaborate as a group. And I think there are other things that you can bring to the table. Food, growing your own food. If there is anyone who knows how to do this and has practiced this and want to volunteer, look for that email tomorrow and reach out. We need to teach people how to grow their own food. We should not be only relying on the grocery stores. I think we're starting to realize that may not be the best option considering how expensive the price of food is now. But we need to learn how to grow our own food. We need to learn how to practice self-care, which I think a lot of us do not practice, especially if you have kids. I know some of my friends that have kids, they're all over the place. So those types of things. And then if there's also anyone else that wants to do like a virtual, I would say exercise session. A lot of people can't afford a gym membership. I just happen to be lucky and one of the gyms near me is $10 a month. But before that, I wasn't going to pay $200 and $250 to go to a gym. That's freaking ridiculous. But you can also exercise at home. I think a lot of people just need the motivation. That's why you see me put the exercise videos on Twitter. I'm just trying to motivate you guys to get up and get going, right? But if you have a group of people doing this with you once a week or a couple of times a week, you're bound to be more excited to do it because you're not alone. So if there's someone who wants to do that, or yoga or whatever. So those are a couple of things that I'm looking for. But the really, really big one, the financial literacy, that is a big one. We need to teach people how to manage their money, and we need to teach people what I feel these things should be taught in high school, and it's not. We need to teach people all these things that go into if you did want to buy a home, how do you even start with that? A lot of people don't even know. So those types of things. And then there was one more I was going to mention, mental health. If you want to volunteer to give people free mental health sessions, with this particular one, you have to be licensed. This is the only one that I'm really particular about because I don't want someone just giving people mental health advice and they're not licensed by the state. That could be a disaster. Okay, let's just be real. But yes, so stay tuned for that. That email should go out tomorrow. Follow my newsletter and we'll be ready to get up and going. All right, so we are going to continue with the ballot measures and then we'll end for tonight. And that is with North Dakota. North Dakota It is the only state in the US that has a public bank. It's called the Bank of North Dakota. So I feel good about going into this one. In North Dakota, citizens of North Dakota through direct, which means after an initiative qualifies to go on the ballot after a successful petition drive, it goes straight to the ballot for voters to pass or ratify. So they can initiate legislation as either a state statute or a constitutional amendment. In North Dakota, citizens also have the power to repeal legislation via veto referendum. The North Dakota Legislative Assembly may also place measures on the ballot as legislatively referred constitutional amendments with a majority vote. There are restrictions, though, in reference to the subject. North Dakota has concurrent resolution 3011 establishes citizen-initiated ballot amendment measures would require that initiated measures are estimated to have significant fiscal impact and must be placed on the general election ballot. It would also prohibit the approval for circulation of any petition to initiate a constitutional amendment that would make a direct appropriation of public funds for a specific purpose or require the Legislative Assembly to appropriate funds for a specific purpose. Roger has a note here and said, these slick mofos, Sabbies, you see this. Remember when I said it's always better to ratify an initiative as an amendment using the citizen-initiated constitutional amendment, rather than run it as a citizen-initiated state statute where they can come in and repeal it, weaken it, or alter it without having to ask you, unlike they would if it were an amendment. So the purpose of this is to force North Dakotans to push more CIS just for them to muck it up later. When it comes to what citizens want their taxes to fund, the state legislator wants to be the sole arbiter of what you pass gets funded and how much of it gets funded. However, legislative alteration. The North Dakota Legislative Assembly may not amend an initiative or appeal an initiative for 7 years without a 2/3 majority vote. That's huge. Voters can pass laws to put what money they want towards initiative laws without having to ratify and worry about the government messing with it unless it is a 2/3 vote. What I do is have an amendment to make 66% vote needed to overturn kick in after 7 years. So in order to the number required. So this part's important as well. North Dakota does not have a voter registration system. The number of signatures required is tied to the population reported by the last decennial census. As such, any U.S. citizen who is at least 18 years old and who has resided in the state for at least 30 days may sign an initiative petition. 2% of the population for state statutes and veto referendums are the number of signatures required for ballot access. 4% required for constitutional amendments, and 25% of the votes cast for the particular office in that election for recall signatures must equal. Officials in Congress are exempt from recall. So let's go ahead and get to the first measure. North Dakota Constitutional Measure 1, term limits for the governor and the state legislator initiative. A yes vote supported limiting the governor to serving 2 4-year terms and limiting state legislators to serving 8 years in the state house and 8 years in the state senate. Look, I'm all for term limits, so let me go on. This passed. It was ratified by 63.43%. Woohoo! Who supported this? An organization called U.S. Term Limits. And then who opposed it? North Dakota Senate Majority Leader Rich Wardner. Interesting. And a former official, former Lieutenant Governor of North Dakota, Lloyd Omdahl. Interesting name. Campaign finance money. there was no campaign finance money spent to oppose it, but there was over $27,000 that was spent to support it. So that's interesting. So Roger has a note here. He says, I think I'm ready to pack up and move. The first ever and still only state public bank in the nation. Direct initiatives to both pass and ratify, as well as repeal state laws and amendments. And now term limits. Let's see if I can get the Peltiers to push single payer and introduce a special lending program with the Bank of North Dakota that issues out loans specifically to co-op startups and to workers who wish to purchase the company. When the economy starts going south, I'm heading to North Dakota. I need to reach back out to the Peltiers to get a confirmation date. But yeah, for those of you who don't know, a friend of mine from high school actually moved to North Dakota. This was like a couple years ago. It was random too. Anyway, he moved to North Dakota for a job, and he told me that North Dakota had more jobs than people. And I thought he was exaggerating, but apparently he was paid very well, and he said the housing was really cheap. So he lived there for like 2.5 years, saved up his money, moved back to North Carolina, and bought a house. So I don't know. Apparently there's something happening in North Dakota. They do have a public bank, and that can help them get some of these initiatives passed. Number 2, North Dakota Statutory Measure 2, Marijuana Legalization Initiative. Now, this one blew my mind. A yes vote supported legalizing the use and possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana for adults 21 years old or older, allowing individuals to grow up to 3 marijuana plants and requiring the Department of Health and Human Services to establish rules regulating adult use marijuana by October 1st, 2023. I was very shocked by this. This did not pass. It failed by 54.94%. Yikes. I was really surprised by this one. The public bank state didn't want to legalize marijuana. Very strange to me. So there's a lot of hoopla there. So who supported it? State Rep Matthew Ruby, some of the organizations, New Approach Advocacy Fund, Marijuana Policy Project, to name a few. But who opposed this? So it was opposed by the Greater North Dakota Chamber, the Catholic Council, Medical Association, Peace Officers Association, Petroleum Council. Why is the oil industry? Okay. Here's one of the arguments why they opposed it. This is Mark Jortsma of the North Dakota Family Alliance. I could go into a long litany of the harmful effects of recreational marijuana. Okay. It is addictive and has adverse effects on mental health and intelligence. Dude, this is so like 1965 propaganda here. Like, who still says that about marijuana today? Driving while acutely intoxicated with marijuana greatly increases the risk of fatal motor vehicle collisions. And states with legal use of recreational marijuana have seen substantial increases in marijuana-related DUIs. The lack of reliable testing methods is a direct threat to workplace safety. Are you kidding me? In 2023, people still hold those views? Oh, man, that's hilarious. Okay. In reference to, that's right, but alcohol is totally legal, hypocrites. I totally hear where you're coming from. Okay, campaign finance money in order to oppose, over $4,000 was spent to oppose it. Over $600,000 was spent to support it. Usually, when there is more money spent to support it, usually it would pass. In this case, that did not happen. So that's interesting. This is very odd. Like, who still has like these draconian views like in 2023? So Roger put a commentary here. I would have loved to have seen this pass for the simple fact of the matter that since the Bank of North Dakota replaces the FDIC as the insurer for community banks and credit unions. This would allow them to take in profits made from the cannabis industry. The problem with legalizing cannabis is that it is still illegal federally, and therefore any bank that is FDIC insured must abide by federal banking regulations, which means they cannot take in profits from ill-gotten gains. Therefore, they would be up to the state or the municipality to handle that, and passing this legislation would have been perfect. That is very weird. And there's an update alert. North Dakota government just passed a law, a punitive draconian law. I told you these draconian rules, like that levies heavy fines and harsh prison sentences for not being careful when going through the process of qualifying initiatives to go on the ballot. This is really to scare the grassroots from even attempting to do direct democracy. Now, according to the link below, this fool wants to run for president. He will make his announcement June 7th, my guess, right after he signs this bill into law. Despite it passing by a veto-proof majority, he can still veto it. So this gentleman here wants to run for president, Governor Doug Burgum. I'm just going to show you. That's him there. This is the guy who wants to make direct democracy, which ballot measures are direct democracy. He wants to make that more difficult. And he's thinking about running for president. What a joke. Let me get out of here. Solution: voters push a veto referendum to repeal the entire law. In addition, now, while the proceeding is a law passed by the government, the following below is a constitutional amendment imposing new requirements to qualify citizen initiatives for the ballot. So here we go. I'm not going to be able to read all of this. I really have to. I'm past my time. But anyway, to make a long story short, it says that voters also would have to approve such measures twice in the primary and general elections. The double approval requirement would not apply to amendments proposed by the state legislature. Currently, voter-initiated amendments only need to be approved in one election. What is the solution? North Dakotans can reject ratification for the simple fact that they are making you vote twice on your own initiatives in two separate sessions that you put on the ballot, but do not require themselves the same legislator initiative amendments, which only needs one legislative session to pass before it is put before the people for ratification. So that is North Dakota. So we'll be moving on to another state next time. I am not here this Sunday. I will not be live. I'm actually going to go see Jimmy Dore perform in Northampton, Massachusetts. So I haven't been up that way in about a minute. So I won't be here Sunday. I am so sorry. But it is Memorial Day weekend. So please enjoy your weekend and the holiday. But I'll tell Jimmy and Steph, you guys said, what's up? Yeah, that's right. Eric said, gotta go hang with the Dore. Yeah, we'll see them Sunday. So I'm excited. Very excited about that. Thank you for the super chat, Roger, Malcolm, Nance. Oh, that's who you called. Okay. That's interesting. All right, guys, that's it. Have a great weekend. Hit the like if you didn't get a chance to do so. Other than that, you know how we do this. I'll be back on Tuesday. So enjoy clips this weekend. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.